Well, hey, here we are, and talking today about public defenders, and want to, give you a full disclosure here. I worked myself as a public defender 2 different times, and I've actually done it off and on for my whole career, but primarily in the beginning, I started out working for a public defender board, okay? And what is a public defender board? Well, what happens is, I guess it's probably better to back up and tell you the other way and explain that the public defender board is a development that came about in modern times, let's say in the late 70s. In the early days, first of all, no one got a lawyer, okay? And that was up until Gideon versus Wainwright, okay? And so this would be a good one to research. And so Gideon basically is an outstanding case, I think, because this guy was not allowed a lawyer on a lower level burglary type case. It's actually what we would call a B&E in Indiana, breaking and entering. But routinely, no one got a lawyer for a criminal defense. There were exceptions to that. In fact, in the 20th century, let's say, that's when the advent of any kind of appointed attorney started, and a lot of times this was only in serious cases, okay? So prior cases where it did happen, places like Philadelphia, big cities, it would be in murder only, okay? Or some places maybe armed robbery, murder, rape, very serious cases, could somebody get a public defender. And so it's a difficult time in the early 20th century. And then what happened was judges discovered that, hey, this could be a political plum, okay? And so what we ended up having is what we called political patronage. And what that was, and I've worked under this system, it's kind of a feudal system, okay? And basically what that means is that the lord, which is in this case the judge, appoints, his drinking buddies, his friends, and people who are totally unsuitable to be a public defender to represent a number of people for whatever reason, just in order to throw them a few bucks. So in other words, the taxpayer pays money into the county in taxes. The judge spends it in the form of a public defender fund and appoints his buddies to represent the poor, untoward people, knowing that some of these guys are not very good lawyers, but they're good guys, they're good drinking friends. So, since that guy supported me in my election as a judge, I'm going to throw a few bucks back to him. And so in a sense, it just kind of reminded me of the Middle Ages. And quite frankly, I was stuck with that system and had to pay money support to get my judge reelected. And that's how guys get in these judges' offices and get to stay there for years and years. I mean, that's just one system. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying it's history. Now, in modern times, this political feudal system has been replaced by a board. And usually here again, though, the judges get to appoint people on these boards. And the boards that I've seen, generally speaking, are all, friends, but they are unpaid. They don't get paid to be on this board, but they do control a large budget, and they can put people on these different public defender jobs. Now, the advent, of the current system is what we really want to show as the professionalization of public defender. And I'd like to think that I was a professional public defender because, I kept up on developments. I was a vicious, strong advocate for my client, I honestly believe, and tried to always do what was best for them, best interest, and yet also represent what they wanted. A lot of times I thought, well, maybe this isn't really the best thing for them, but that's what they want. For example, I basically, a lot of times tried to get them to plead guilty because I felt like they were guilty, but I didn't force that on them. And if they wanted a jury trial, I love jury trials. So I was always looking to help my client, have a jury trial. The problem, though, was there's some people that were public defenders that prided themselves, and this was a guy that was up under this political plum thing, prided himself on never having a trial. I think I might have mentioned somewhere else. This guy was very proud of the statement. He said, I was a public defender for 7 years and never had a jury trial that entire time. Now, I had hundreds of jury trials as a public defender. Now, another thing I will point out, though, is public defenders are complained about more than any other attorney, probably. Attorneys are complained about universally. We know that, which is not fair, but that's just how it is. The flip side of that is that there's a lot of false complaints filed against public defenders because, they tried to tell the guy, well, you don't want to go to trial here. The judge could really smack you as far as a sentence, but if I can negotiate a plea, we might be able to get a lesser sentence. Some guys are just so stubborn, you can't tell them anything. So they go to trial, they get 20 years instead of 2. I had an actual case where a guy got 20 years instead of 6. So he turned around and filed a complaint against me. And that's exactly what happens to public defenders. And so in a way, you're kind of a sitting duck. Well, all the time, it's your job to make sure that you protect yourself. And so that's what makes the job complicated and not worthwhile, and that's why I'm teaching college right now. Because you had to send extra letters, you had to go the extra mile just to protect your back. And that's the really bad part of being a public defender. It's tough, you don't win very often, you're dealing with some sleazy people, but I was always proud of that in a sense because that's our Constitution. It provides for this, it's set forth. I am confident that the framers of our Constitution wanted to see this happen. It's clearly written in the Bill of Rights. And so personally, I felt like I've done an important part as a servant of the government to protect the rights of the people of this country. And sometimes I did win, and in those cases I felt like I deserved to win. Now, a lot of times I represented people as a paid attorney, but I never got paid. And sometimes I just let that happen because I felt obligated to do a certain amount of public service in those cases, even though I was not getting paid. And that's a whole nother level, is the unpaid volunteers, what we call a certain level. We are all obligated as attorneys to do a certain level of service to the community. So that's a whole nother story that we'll probably have on another day. But just in terms of public defender, you start criticizing public defender. Just a warning, I was one twice, and really multiple times, and I felt like the job that I did was important. I tried to do my best at it. There's good public defenders, just like there's good policemen. There's bad public defenders, just like there's bad policemen. A study was done by a guy, and it's kind of funny, and I'm going to try to find this, and I'm going to post it as part of my discussion, but this study was done by this guy that thought that since 1920, with the advent of the public defender system, that public defenders actually harmed the legal process of cases. And in fact, going into it, you should never go into research with an attitude, well, I think this is the outcome and this is the outcome I'm looking for. That's terrible research. You need an open mind. But anyway, in spite of that, in spite of having the deck basically stacked against proving just the opposite, that's exactly what happened in that study. And he clearly, shamelessly admits it right in the study that he was thinking that it would prove that public defenders were a bad thing. And when it got to the end of it, he realized that public defenders are a good thing because they increase the efficiency of the system. They weed out the bad cases from the good cases. They give clients good advice. The client in turn benefits from that advice. So in the vast majority of cases, public defenders do perform a good service. There are those few, just like I said, that are very proud of the fact that they're not doing a good service because they think, in a way, it's just one more way to get even with these criminals and these defendants. And that runs counter to our oath as attorneys. So it's very unethical in my mind, at least. So basically, interesting subject matter. Ask any questions that you want to. Broad shoulders here, as you can see, and glad to answer any questions you might have about what's it like to be a public defender. So hey, good talking to you. Hope you enjoyed this. Give me your comments in response to my discussion. Thanks a lot.